Thanks for having me again. Yeah, once again, I'm glad to be here with you all, and it's always a pleasure. And what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the subject of love. Now, love is a very important topic. It's on many of our minds regularly, and it's something that dominates music. It dominates movies, TV. It's a theme that it will never be exhausted. But here's the problem. Many of us have a misconception about love, and because of our misconception and misunderstanding of what love is, we make many poor decisions and many poor choices in our lives, some of them having lifelong consequences. So it's really important for us to try and get a better understanding or a right understanding of what love is, to help us understand how to go forward in our lives and in the decisions that we make, and maybe even in the people that we choose to be with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to challenge your ideas about what love is. And I would like you all to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Stay with me, because when I land the plane, it's probably going to make a little bit more sense. So if you hear something that might be contrary to what you believe about love or what you've been taught about love, I just want you to have a little patience and give me some time. I think it'll all make sense by the time we're done, or at least I hope so. So the question of what is love is an age-old question. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, there was a very popular song, and it was called "What Is Love?" And this is something that people are trying to understand, because people want love, whether they realize what it is or fully understand it or not. But to start to understand what love is, we probably want to understand what love is not. Okay, so at least if we can eliminate what love is not, then we can start to focus in on what love is, or what we think it might be. If you watch movies, if you listen to hit songs, love tells us the hit songs tells us that love is something very specific. They make it seem like it's a feeling, right? It's an emotion. It's something that is tangible. When you see that person, that sparks your desire, you get those butterflies in the stomach. They're telling you that's what love is, right? And many of us, because we think that's what love is, because we get our education and understanding about love from movies and from music and things like that, when we get those feelings, we say, I must be in love. And so sometimes we'll make a choice to be with somebody that isn't right for us. Sometimes we'll make a choice to be with somebody even when we already have somebody, because we think we're in love, because we think love is a feeling. Okay, well, let me tell you, we'll start right there. Love is not what the movies and the hit songs in the world tell you it is. Just straight up. Love is not an emotion. Love is not a feeling. And it'll make sense in a little while. You might be disagreeing already. And I say that because I said this in a group of largely women. And boy, that was a tough one, because they all came for me. They all disagree. I disagree. Love is a feeling. And you know what? I didn't want to be rude, but inside I was thinking, and that's why many of you make bad choices about who you're with and who you choose to be with. But love is not what the movies and what the hit songs tell us it is. It just isn't. Okay? Love doesn't hurt. Now you may be saying, wait a minute. I've been in love many times, and love does hurt. Well, here's what I want to submit to you, okay? If love hurts, it's probably something else. Okay. Now, many of you know that I'm big into psychology, and I love psychology and emotions and relationships and things like that. But sometimes what we think might be love might be something else. I'll give you an example. It might be fear, right? You're afraid to lose somebody, and you don't want to let them go because you're afraid of what your life might look like without them. Guess what? That fear of letting them go, that not wanting to let them go, that fear of not wanting to figure out how to live without them is not love. It's fear. And fear is unhealthy. As a matter of fact, fear is the root of all negative emotions. Many people have made many bad choices out of fear. And in fact, when it comes to relationships, how many bad choices have we made in relationships because of fear? How many women getting older, right, finally decide to settle down with somebody because their biological clock is ticking and they think, if I don't find somebody quickly, then I may never find anybody, and they end up with somebody that is just the wrong person for them, and they end up maybe divorced, just a few years later, and starting all over again when they're even older. Right? How many times have we seen that choice? How many times have we seen fear cause somebody to do the unthinkable, kill their spouse, kill their children, and then turn the gun on themselves because they were afraid of being without their family or their wife or whatever? We've seen that horror story over and over again in the news. If love hurts, it might be something like attachment, right? We can form attachments to somebody for many different reasons. As a matter of fact, the way that sex was designed was that it was supposed to create a bond between you and the other person, right? Interestingly, the Bible says something to the effect of, man shall leave his mother and father and cleave unto his wife, and they shall become one flesh. In other words, they'll be bonded quite literally and then figuratively as well, because that intimacy creates a soul tie, because this isn't something that you do with anybody else. So when you connect with them, it creates a very deep bond. So that feeling that you might feel might be attachment created by physical intimacy, but it may not be love necessarily. Sometimes what we may mistake for love might be idolatry. Right? You put somebody on a pedestal and you admire them so much. You think you love them, but in actuality, it's a form of idolatry. Love may be addiction, right? There is an author by the name of Howard M. Halpern who wrote a book called How to Break Your Addiction to a Person. Now, you may hear that title and you may think, that's ridiculous. How do you become addicted to a person? Well, I'm here to tell you that it is absolutely possible to become addicted to a person. And sometimes you might think that you are in love with somebody and you can't let them go. And you might hear all these hit songs, talking about, I never want to live without you, and how can I breathe without you, and all these, these lovesick sentimentalism and things like that. But in actuality, you are addicted to that person. And you say, that's ridiculous. It's not the same thing as drugs or alcohol. And I'm here to tell you that it absolutely is, because when you are feeling that euphoria that comes from infatuation and connecting with somebody, the chemical processes that happen in the brain are identical to what happens when you do heroin and cocaine and other drugs. So yes, it is the same thing. And yes, you can become addicted to a person. And it's even more dangerous because this person that you're addicted to is not some substance. It's not some inanimate object. It is a living, breathing person that can then turn around and take that addiction and use it to manipulate you and use you for their own aims. And many of us have been through that. Sometimes love, if it hurts, it's something else. It may be possessiveness, right? Maybe you have abandonment issues, and maybe you're afraid of being alone. Maybe you have jealousy issues, right? Interestingly enough, it has been said that jealousy is the only substance that can corrupt the container that is holding it, right? So a lot of these things that we think are love are absolutely destructive, self-destructive, and destructive to those of us, to those that are around us. So we have to understand that if love hurts, it may be something else. It may be fear, it may be attachment, maybe idolatry, maybe addiction. And if you read that book by Howard M. Halpern, How to Break Your Addiction to a Person, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. That is one of the best books I've ever read, and I highly recommend it. It may be possessiveness. Here's the other thing. Many of us have experienced heartache. Nobody's heart aches out of love. In pop culture, love, it gets conflated with desire all the time. From childhood, we learn that you can like something or you can love it, right? As if it's only different degrees in the same thing, but that's not necessarily the case, right? Love and desire are two different things. Desire is what it is. Just because we want something a lot doesn't mean necessarily that we love that thing. And I know we say, oh, I love chocolate cake. Oh, I love pizza. Oh, I love, football, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that we actually love it, that means it's that we desire this thing, that we really enjoy partaking of this particular thing or behavior or whatever. So sometimes we conflate the word love with desire. And again, that happens. This is what happens in pop culture. So we need to be cognizant of that so that when we see this conflation of love and desire, we can mentally be aware of that and then separate from that, because otherwise we will make bad decisions about some things in our lives. Love is selflessness. It's not selfishness. It's the opposite of need and attachment. To an individual, it's the sensation of allowing rather than seeking, letting go rather than grasping, right? It's important that we understand that love, for it to be love, is just about as much about somebody saying no as it is yes. It's about being willing to let something go. If forgive me, I have a train that passes by the house. Imagine, love, the person that you're with being like a butterfly, right? Now it's a beautiful thing when the butterfly comes down and it flies into your hand and they walk on your hand and they flap their wings. That's very beautiful, right? Now, if the butterfly wants to go, you have to keep your hand open, right? And you have to be willing to let that butterfly stay there with you for a time or go whenever they're ready. Because if you try to keep the butterfly there, the only way that you can do that is by closing your hand. And if you close your hand while the butterfly is in it, guess what happens to the butterfly? Right? So love is the opposite of need, of attachment, of possessiveness. It's letting go rather than grasping. You have to be willing to let go of something if it's truly love. Otherwise, it's something else. Love is subtle, it's silent, it's delicate. And in its beginnings, in the very beginnings of love, it can be very easily drowned out by attachment, by lust, by fear. But, in order for love to be love, love must have space. And when you apply force to keeping somebody with you or forcing them to do something that you want them to do, what that does is it crowds out love, right? Love is a very powerful thing, but it's not forceful. Love is powerful, but it's not forceful. There's a difference. Love has to have space. Okay? When you look at desire versus love, desire is simple and it's often reckless. How many times have we desired something because we thought we loved it, and we've engaged with that thing or that person and ended up regretting it years later when feelings changed and said, what was I thinking? If I could go back in time to my 17-year-old self, I wouldn't even have to say anything. I would just smack myself right upside of the head anytime that anytime that I was about to do something stupid based purely on desire. We need to really carefully manage, our desires to avoid them from confusing us and thinking that we're in love and causing great harm to our lives. It's very, very important, because here's the thing. Desire is totally different in that it's the intention to change something, to do something, and it's causing us to go after something that we want, whether we should have it or not, whether it's healthy or not, whether it's a good thing or not. Once we desire something, we're just headlong over the precipice, right? Love is different, because love doesn't cause us to go after something, to try and win something, to try and grasp something, to try and keep something and hold something. Love is simply a willingness to let whatever it is that we want be what it is, and be willing to let it go if it wants to go. We don't really understand that often, because a lot of us, are very confused about love, because maybe many of us didn't have good examples of love in our homes growing up, right? Some of us grew up witnessing loveless marriages, or maybe we grew up in single parent homes where we really didn't see a lot of loving interactions between adults that are supposed to be the role models for us. So we may be very confused about what love is. A lot of us grow up, we think that to love something is simply to want something very badly, like we talked about before. But it's hard to be sensitive to love when you're overrun by desire. That's a big problem. Love isn't something that can be forced. If you're trying to force something, then it's not really love at all. Desire can happen at the same time as love. Now, when I see my wife, obviously I desire to be with my wife, right? I have feelings towards my wife, feelings sometime of desire, and that's okay. Those two things can happen at the same time, but they're not the same thing. Okay, because I can have desire for somebody if I'm allowing myself to be led purely by desire and lust and feelings and things like that. I can desire somebody that I don't necessarily love. That can happen to any of us. That's human nature, and that's why something has to check our behavior. And that's the difference between love and desire. You see, you can't just love anybody. You can desire anybody, but you can't just love anybody, because the two are different. Desire can happen in almost an instinctive sort of way, and it has to be checked and kept under control. But love, there's something more to love, right? Love is different. Desire can be a feeling, an emotion, a want, a need, going after something that you have to think, or at least you think you have to have. But love can be something very, very different. Jealousy isn't love, nor is it the evidence of love. Sometimes, when people are very young and they're immature and they don't really understand love, they can think that, if somebody is showing jealousy, oh, that means that they really love me, or or maybe if they're not showing jealousy, oh, they don't really love me. And sometimes people that are young and in love will play little games to try and make their partner jealous to see if they really, quote unquote, love them. But just because somebody's jealous doesn't mean that they love you. Jealousy isn't any evidence of love. Jealousy is one thing, pure and simple, and we talked about that a little while ago. Jealousy is fear. Love doesn't drive people insane. Love drives them sane, right? See, jealousy drives people insane because the root cause of jealousy is fear. Jealousy causes people to do the unthinkable, and we talked about that just a little while ago. But love, real love, true love, drives people to do something sane instead of insane. Love drives people to do things that they normally wouldn't because it's the right thing to do. Desire in its different forms can drive people to do anything, but love, you'll never see love drive people to kill or steal or cheat or worry. If people do those things, it's not love. Okay. Love is also something that it will reveal itself when you release that need to have the object of your affection. You know, if there is somebody or something that you really desire, but you find out that that person, for example, isn't interested in you in the same way and doesn't want to be with you, or that thing you desire isn't really, healthy for you. Love is when you let that thing go. When you see that there's no reason to make it yours, that, hey, this person is not for you, they don't want to be with you, so you let it go. That's when you can see true love, right? Because possessiveness and jealousy and control is fear. Do you see what I'm saying? So you have to understand the difference between those two. To love something is to be willing to let it go even when you want it to stay. And love is much more sophisticated than desire. There's many higher degrees to love than there is to desire. Desire has been around forever, right? It's what has driven humanity for thousands of years. It's loud. It handles things poorly. It only goes, in one direction towards that thing that you want. And when you need a sober driver, desire makes you drunk, right? Desire is like getting in the car with a drunk driver. Desires are personal. They're oftentimes attached to you and they end where you end. And they can't be any bigger than you, but love is bigger than you. Love is far bigger than you and I. To love something is not just for you. To love someone is for their happiness to be the same as your own. See, that's not what desire is. Desire is all about you. Desire is all about you, all about satisfying your want, your need, scratching your itch, right? And who cares about anybody else? But love is for someone's happiness to be the same as your own. And we have to remember that. And that's why being willing to let somebody go if they're no longer happy being with you is love. You can't force somebody to be here, right? It's tough to identify to define love, and you can throw words at it and never really pin it down. That's why it's been more misidentified and misconstrued than just about anything else in the world. But we can know what love is not. Now, interestingly, the Bible talks about love, and in no uncertain terms. In the book of John, chapter 15, verses 12 and 13, Jesus, the night before he died, said something very, very interesting. And it's something that the disciples wouldn't get until sometime later. He said, "This is my commandment, that ye love one another as I have loved you. Greater love hath no man than this, than that a man lay down his life for his friends." Think about that for a second. He says, "Greater love hath no man than this, than that a man lay down his life for his friends." In other words, he says, there is no greater love than being willing to die for your friends. And then prior to that, he says, here's a commandment I want to leave you with. I want you to love each other in the way that I'm going to love you. And then he says, greater love hath no man than this, than that a man lay down his life for his friends, because Jesus knew the very next day he was going to die for his friends. And he wanted them to understand that that was the greatest exhibition of love in the history of the universe. So what is he saying here? If you're willing, now the world has trouble defining love, right? They have trouble defining love. They conflate it with something like desire, and there's all sorts of confusion that comes from that. They think it's a feeling. Hollywood tells us it's a feeling. The hit songs tells us it's a feeling, an emotion, things like that. But Jesus defines love. Even though there's a lot of confusion in the world about what love is, Jesus kind of defines it right here in a way that makes so much sense, and it's so powerful. He says, essentially, when he says, greater love hath no man than this, than that a man lay down his life for his friends, he says, love is sacrifice. Let me say it again. Love is sacrifice. It's not a feeling. It's not an emotion. You see, emotions change, right? If you don't sleep well, you get up and you're cranky, right? Some people, if they're hungry, they walk around and they're cranky and angry. They call it being hangry, right? And we know some of those people. Some of us, if things aren't going right, we're not feeling so good towards certain people. And as soon as we feel better, we might regret some of the things that we did or said, or we might wonder why we felt that way. Because emotions, it's like if your life is driven purely by emotions, it's like being a boat in the ocean with no anchor, right? You go here and there and you're tossed by every wind and every wave of emotion that comes along. It just takes you wherever it wants to take you, and you have no control, and you're just kind of letting life happen to you. But that's not what love is. Love isn't a choice. Love isn't an emotion. It's a choice, right? Love is sacrifice, and to be willing to sacrifice something, that's a choice. So let me make this clear. Love is not an emotion. Love is a choice. It's a choice. And, we have to understand that, because if we think that love is a feeling, then we make certain choices in our lives that we will eventually come to regret, right? When you're married for a long time, The relationship might have been, in the beginning, you just, your wife could do no wrong, your husband could do no wrong. They were just so perfect and so amazing, and they just made you so happy. And every time, they called you, just it made your heart, go pitter pat, and you felt the little butterflies. That's called the in love euphoria, right? Well, eventually, what happens is if you're with somebody over any period of time, the shine of newness of that relationship and connection sort of wears off, and new things get old, right? And the relationship settles in to what it's going to be, meaning, you know you're not going to have those same extreme highs that come from the euphoria of being in love. And and most relationships will be kind of like a rolling hill, right? You'll have some ups, you'll have some downs, but it's never going to be, extreme, extreme highs, and certainly hopefully not extreme lows. And of course, you can make that relationship go a little bit smoother by continuing to court each other and do the things that you did when you first met each other. Communication, really help, not just when you have problems, and not just about domestic daily things like what time we're going to pick up the kids, and who has to go to practice here, and who has to get their homework done and stuff like that. But just talking, about each other's day, and about each other's lives, and about each other's feelings, and about each other's dreams and goals and things like that. That kind of stuff that you did in the beginning to get to know each other will be helpful in maintaining your relationship, because you must continue to get to know each other and learn each other, because people change. And if we stop being curious and interested in our spouses during our relationship, eventually we're going to look at them at some point and say, I don't even know you, you know so it's really important that we do those things, because and that we to maintain the love. But we have to understand that it's never going to be the same as in the beginning, right? That's a very immature form of love. A mature form of love is, an understanding that, hey, this person is my life partner, this is who I choose to be with, and I'm going to be with this person through sickness or health, for richer, for poor, for good times and bad. So the marriage vows, right? But if we think love is an emotion, love is a feeling, the devil will send somebody, life will send somebody in to cross your path that will be very intriguing. There's something that they call the 80-20 rule, right? Your spouse or your life partner may have 80% of the things you like, but they're missing like this 20%. Like, you just wish they were a little more considerate, or you wish they were, they had better conversation, or you wish they were more like this or more like that, and they're not. Well, guess what? Somebody will come along that has that 20% that your spouse is missing. Now, your spouse, they may not have anything else that your spouse has, but they may have that 20% that your spouse is missing. And all of a sudden, if all you focus on is the negatives about your spouse, you'll see that 20%, you'll hone in on that, and all of a sudden you'll become infatuated, and all of a sudden you'll develop these feelings, and all of a sudden you think you're in love, and now you're making choices that may cause a great deal of pain in your life and in your spouse's life. And so we have to be very guarded against that, because again, I got to say it again, love is not an emotion. Love is a choice. Love is sacrifice, right? There's going to be times where you don't even like your spouse, let alone love them. We get on each other's nerves. That's just human nature, right? But if we understand that, hey, right now I'm not really feeling you. You've gotten on my last nerves. As a matter of fact, I'm going to sleep in the guest bedroom tonight because I need some space. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Because again, love is about letting somebody go. And if somebody needs space, let them go, right? Let her go to mom's house for the weekend so she can clear her head and you can clear your head. And then, they say absence makes the heart grow fonder. And then you get back together and you make up in the way that married folks make up. And sometimes that can be really good. But you don't want to, mistake the fact that you're upset with each other, or you're not really feeling very loving toward each other, as being out of love and being, no longer right for each other, because that's baloney. Love is a choice. Love is a choice that even if I don't particularly, even if I'm not particularly happy with you at a particular moment, I'm still going to be with you because you're my life partner and I'm committed to you. That's love, right? It would be much easier to chase people who made us feel a certain way. It would be much easier to go and try and satisfy those desires in other places. But when you're willing to sacrifice those things because you want to honor your commitment and honor your vows and honor, your relationship, that's love, because love is sacrifice, and that's a choice. You can't it's not sacrifice if you know don't do it willingly. That's the very definition of sacrifice, is that you're voluntarily laying something down for someone or something else. And so when we understand the definition that Jesus gave us, he said, greater love hath no man than this, than that a man lay down his life for a friend, we can begin to get a new conception of what love is. It's not what the Hollywood movies tell us. It's not what the popular songs of the day tell us. And this is why, especially the ladies, you have to be very careful about watching these rom-coms, the romantic comedies and things like that. And they have all these stupid movies on like the Hallmark Channel and Lifetime, and it's always pretty much the same sort of scenario where the woman, she's a high-powered corporate attorney and in the big city, whatever that is, and her father passes away, and she has to go back to the small town that she came from. And she's just gonna sell the house because she's got to get back to her high-powered corporate job. And then all of a sudden, she starts running into old friends, but she's very distant because she's a high-powered big city attorney, and they're all kind of like, hey, what's wrong with her? She's changed, and I can't believe you're going to sell the house. This has been in your family for generations, and how could you do that? And then all of a sudden she meets the really good-looking guy. He's a baker, or he's like a carpenter or a handyman, something like that, one of those occupations. And all of a sudden she falls in love, and she decides that she's going to give up her career in the big city to move back to her small town and run the bakery with him and not sell the house, and yada yada yada, and everybody lives happily ever after. And that's love, right? Sometimes when we watch I know it sounds like I watch these movies a lot. Trust me, I don't watch them at all. But certain people I know do. And in passing, when I see this stuff, I'm like, this is literally the same thing every single time. But, those kind of things sometimes will give us a misconception of what love is. So we have to be very careful about what we, feed our mind through our ears and our eyes, because that greatly affects how we perceive love. Love may not be the slick talking, smooth walking guy that comes into your life and sweeps you off your feet. Love may be, your husband who, though he may not know how to express his feelings all the time, he gets up and goes to work and takes care of his family and fixes your car and changes your oil and mows the lawn and things like that. And if you're having a problem feeling unloved, that's where you have to communicate, right? Because love is something far different than what we are told in the movies. Martin G. Collins, he gave this quote. He says, and I'm going to wrap it up soon. He says, in our human relationships, we want others to sacrifice themselves for us. Yet it seems so hard to reciprocate the same towards others on a continual basis. Nevertheless, self-sacrifice is the essence of true Christianity. Did you hear that? He says, in our human relationships, we want others to sacrifice themselves for us. Yet it seems so hard to reciprocate the same toward others on a continual basis. Nevertheless, self-sacrifice is the essence of true Christianity. Because why? Because the Bible, the true Christianity, is all about love, right? What did Jesus say? In a couple chapters before, he said, greater love hath no man than this, and that a man lay down his life for his friends. He said, love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. He said that in John chapter 13, I believe it was verse 36. when he said that, what he was saying is people aren't going to know that you're Christians because you say you're a Christian. People aren't going to know you're a Christian because you do certain ritual things. They're going to know you're a Christian by your love, by the love that you have for each other, right? And by your willingness to sacrifice for each other. That's the very essence of true Christianity. It's self-sacrifice, because the essence of true Christianity is supposed to be love, right? And really, whether you're a Christian or not, when love is the driving force in your life, and I'm not talking about desire, I'm not talking about an emotion or a feeling, I'm talking about service to others, being willing to sacrifice for others. Now, that doesn't mean you be a doormat. I'm not telling you to be a doormat, because there is such a thing as tough love. And tough love is being willing to say no to somebody, even when your love for them, your desire for them, your heart for them wants to help them, because sometimes people need to hear that. Sometimes people don't need to have whatever they want all the time. It's called tough love, and that's okay. But being willing to do things like unsolicited acts of kindness, that's love, and expecting nothing in return. That's love. Love is extremely rewarding, but it's also costly, because the person who loves must also be willing to sacrifice, because sacrifice is love's very essence, and we have to remember that. So, whether or not you fully understand love, just know that love is not a feeling, love is not an emotion. Love is sacrifice, and sacrifice is a choice. We have to be able to separate those things, because desire happens with the heart, right? Desire is a very carnal thing, but love is an excess, right? That's why the Bible tells us, the book of Jeremiah, chapter 17, verse 9, says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Right? The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Love is never driven by the heart. Love is driven by the mind, because sacrifice has to be a choice, and a choice has to happen up here, not here. So as long as we, even if we don't fully understand love, and even if we're sort of confused by the idea of love, as long as we understand that love is not a feeling, that love is not an emotion, but love is a choice, and love is sacrifice, then we'll be able to make better decisions. And I hope that helped any of you who are maybe confused about the idea of love, and love, what is and what it isn't. And if not, I hope that we can talk again, and continue our conversation about this very important topic of love. Thank you again for joining me, and look forward to seeing you guys again soon.